Hello, and welcome to our virtual public meeting on front of pack nutrition labeling. I am Susan Winkler, and I have the honor of serving as the Chief Executive Officer of the Reagan-Udall Foundation for the FDA. Thank you for joining us for today's discussion. For those of you who are new to the Foundation's work, we are the nonprofit, non-government organization created by Congress to help FDA do more to protect and promote the public's health. One way we do that is by convening meetings like this one to help the agency share information and hear from stakeholders about important issues. Our role is to create engagement opportunities to help inform the agency's work. Of note, we do not advise the FDA on regulatory decision making. So let's take a look at our agenda. In just a moment, we will hear opening remarks from agency leadership and a presentation from FDA. This will be followed by a panel discussion focused on why nutrition labeling matters. And we will close out with a time for public comment, which required advance registration. And thank you to those who registered in advance. We were able to accommodate each organization that requested the opportunity to present public comment, and we will hold each organization to the same time frame for their remarks. Here's a quick preview of how the public comment section will operate. We will begin public comment at around 3:45, and I will list the upcoming speakers in groups of 3, so you have advance notice of your appearance. Press the raise hand function when your name is called, and we will make your audio and video available, although you will also need to have your video turned on and be unmuted. If you provided a slide to support your 2 minutes of remarks, that slide will appear as I call on you. So now let's turn to some substance. We're honored to have FDA Commissioner Robert Califf with us this afternoon. And Dr. Califf, I'm happy to welcome you to the Foundation screen for the second time this week. This time to talk about nutrition. Dr. Califf, would you please speak for a bit?
Morning. Thank you, Susan, and thanks to the Reagan-Udall Foundation for focusing on organizing and hosting today's important public meeting on front of package labeling. This is a key aspect of the FDA's nutrition work and an important priority. As most of you are aware, the FDA regulates around 80% of the U.S. food supply. One key responsibility of this oversight is the complex task of preventing and responding to foodborne illness outbreaks. But another responsibility that forms a critical part of the FDA's mission, the focus of today's meeting, is helping create a healthier food supply and providing American consumers with key nutrition information we can all use to make informed, healthy choices. FDA has broad authority over food labeling, including authority to require that nutrition information be provided to consumers. Ensuring access to key nutrition information about the foods we eat is an essential aspect of our work that goes to the very core of our mission to protect and promote public health. It's worth noting that our work in this area also supports the all-of-government and all-of-society approach the administration is taking to reduce diet-related diseases. From USDA's powerful WIC program that has a long-standing history of helping moms, kids, and babies thrive, to the research and public health agendas of the NIH and CDC. The food industry also has responsibility and an opportunity to provide additional information and healthier choices that American consumers are asking for. That's an important part of the equation, since government most assuredly can't do this alone. We're increasingly aware of the powerful influence of visual and verbal cues in a pervasive world of advertising and social media. And there's also increasing concern about the constant effort to make less nutritious options more appealing to taste and appearance, including clever intertwining of food and popular culture. Using the available tools that have been granted by Congress, we're taking positive steps to advance nutrition. For instance, we updated the iconic nutrition facts label on packaged foods, implemented labeling requirements for restaurant menus, established voluntary sodium targets, and we are updating the definition of the, quote, healthy, unquote, claim. Our latest work on front of package labeling has the potential to be similarly iconic. Although we can't use many of the methods of modern advertising, We do have the ability to make basic information available to all consumers. And putting the fundamental information on the front of the pack is a common sense way to improve the probability that the consumer will have a chance to be informed. These regulatory developments are important, but I want to step back for a moment to underscore the profound personal impact that nutrition has on health. Each year, more than 1 million Americans die from diet-related diseases, including cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and certain forms of cancer. And while we've seen enormous progress in terms of controlling or developing treatments for many of these diseases, alarmingly, we're in the midst of a significant backsliding related to many diseases and chronic illnesses. This reversal is also contributing to a catastrophic decline in our life expectancy. I was just in Singapore, and they are approaching an average lifespan of 85 years, while we're at 76 years and dropping. Almost a full decade difference in how long we can expect to live, and an even greater difference when you factor in how long we are living in good health. Even more worrisome is that much of this negative trajectory is based on or driven by disparities that are a function of race, ethnicity, education, and wealth, as well as where someone lives. People in rural settings, for example, are seeing a dramatic decline in health and life expectancy compared to those in urban settings. And people without a college degree have an 8.5-year shorter lifespan in America compared to people with a college degree. And those are just some of the most prominent disparities. I know I just cited a variety of statistics about the burden of diet-related diseases, which are important to understand, but we can't forget that we're talking about real people's lives here. These are not just statistics. I'm glad that there's a panel in today's meeting to hear stories and ground our conversation in why this work is so important. Over the last several months, I've been meeting with many groups, including patients, family members, healthcare professionals, and many others who have a direct stake in fighting these diseases. Time and again in these discussions, I've heard from patients, consumers, and others just how important it is to have clear labeling, not only on medicines, but on their foods. They want it to be easier to pick out foods that can improve their health, preventing disease and extending their lives. A parent, for instance, once explained to me the necessity of having their diabetic teenager easily identify which foods are better for them. We're tackling this challenge through a suite of nutrition initiatives, many of which were highlighted in the White House's National Strategy on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health. Front and center is our work on front-of-package nutrition labeling. Front-of-package labels can help consumers quickly and easily identify foods that can help them build a healthy eating pattern. Countries around the world are seeing success with this approach. But we can't help to solve the problem of diet-related diseases in this country if we don't also look at our policies with an eye toward increasing equity. Unfortunately, issues of nutrition and health are often exacerbated and complicated by a variety of social disparities: race, ethnicity, wealth, education, and where we live. Front-of-package labeling is part of FDA's broader approach to advancing health equity by helping consumers to identify foods that could improve dietary patterns. And research shows that front-of-package labels may be particularly helpful for people who may be less familiar with nutrition information. As I said before, the FDA can't solve this epidemic of diet-related disease on its own. We need to work collectively to better support the health of Americans. Together, we can ensure that Americans get the information they need to make good and well-informed decisions about their health. Front-of-the-package labeling is an important step in this direction and is at the center of many ongoing efforts to help promote public health through nutrition labeling, healthy food options, and making it easier to develop healthy habits. I look forward to the comments from today's session to further inform our work in this important area.
So it looks like we just lost Commissioner Califf there, but Commissioner Califf, I will assure that we thank you for your remarks and thank you for joining us today. With that, I'm going to turn to FDA's newest Deputy Commissioner and the first to hold this particular position. Jim Jones joined the agency just under 2 months ago as the first Deputy Commissioner for Human Foods. Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to having you step on our foundation stage virtually and in person, not only today, but in the future. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Deputy Commissioner Jones.
Susan, good to see you. I want to thank the Commissioner for his remarks, and thank you to the Foundation for hosting this meeting. Having served on the Reagan-Udall Foundation's expert panel to review the FDA's Human Foods Program, it is quite something to now be joining this forum in my new role as Deputy Commissioner for Human Foods. I'm very excited about the work ahead, and I'm happy to report that even as the reorganization proposal is being finalized, we are already applying new energy and focus to our work. 8 weeks in, I can tell you that nutrition is very much top of mind, not only because it is one of our key priorities under the reorganization, but because nutrition has long been a priority of the FDA's. We have several important initiatives underway, thanks to hard work by everyone who has worked on this issue for many years. And as Commissioner Califf noted, Preview Nutrition offers us one of the best public health interventions, reducing chronic illnesses and premature death. We are pulling multiple levers to now facilitate improved nutrition. One of our key strategies is helping consumers make healthier choices by providing at a glance nutrition information. So we are looking at what is on the packet, as is evidenced by us coming together today. Front-of-pack labeling has the potential to be a very useful tool for U.S. consumers. It will complement the nutrition facts label and work with our other labeling initiatives, including our proposed updates to the definition of the healthy claim and our research on potential healthy symbol. We're also looking at what is in the packet. For example, earlier this year, we proposed a rule to allow the use of salt substitutes in standardized foods, such as bread and cheeses, which salt is required or optional ingredient. And next year, we will update the 2021 short-term voluntary sodium reduction targets for a broad range of processed, packaged, and prepared foods, which is a commitment to national strategy on nutrition and health. We're seeing some preliminary but encouraging signs of progress in this area. We're also in the early stages of thinking through with federal partners potential strategies to reduce the consumption of added sugar. And just last week, we hosted a very well-attended follow-up meeting and listening sessions to hear from stakeholders on their ideas and perspectives related to added sugar production. The Federal Register is open until mid-January, after which time we'll review the comments and feedback we've received to identify the best next steps. The added sugars meeting last week and today's meeting are important ways for us to gather information and feedback. In addition, we have had dozens of meetings with organizations and companies, and we will continue to engage to dig deeper into these issues. We want to make sure that our efforts help create a healthier food supply that everyone has access to. For this reason, the FOP research was designed to oversample individuals from underserved communities and those most at risk for diet-related disease. We are meeting with tribes and other community members experiencing diet-related diseases to hear how front-of-package labeling can help them find healthy options. By including communities often left out of the discussions and hearing the perspectives of industry, public health and consumer groups, academia, healthcare groups, we at the FDA are better able to ensure that we maximize the potential of our actions to have the greatest positive impact on health and close the gap in health disparities. And by coming together and finding common ground, we're in a much better position to identify solutions that work for as many entities as possible. This sort of collaboration, early and often, increases the likelihood of finding solutions that are optimal. It also allows us to better understand the implications of different approaches, and ultimately is how we make progress in achieving our shared goal of improving nutrition for people across the country. As I've said before, we can accomplish much more together than any of us can accomplish separately. Again, thank you, to the Reagan-Udall Foundation for bringing us all together today. And I look forward to all of us continuing these conversations moving forward. Thank you.
Deputy Commissioner Jones, thank you for investing the time to join us today, as well as for having this conversation to gather additional information. We did hear a little bit that a couple of people had difficulty hearing you, so we will be sure to post your remarks at the end of the meeting so that people can read what you said. Many people could hear you, but I just wanted to make sure that we do that as well. So thank you, Deputy Commissioner Jones. I'm going to turn to your colleague. You're welcome. And I'm going to turn to your colleague, Dr. Robin McKinnon, to give us some updated information on the agency's work to date on front of package labeling. So Dr. McKinnon, you serve as Senior Advisor for Nutrition Policy at FDA's Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. I know you are steeped in these issues, and we are looking forward to hearing from you. Would you come on camera, unmute, and share your insight?
Great. Thank you, Susan. And thank you to the Foundation for hosting this meeting. As the Commissioner noted, we're facing an epidemic of diet-related chronic diseases right now. We've known this for some time, but what has changed is the call and the commitment to action that we've seen by the White House, the Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health, and the National Strategy that was released last year. And the National Strategy highlights that FDA will conduct research and propose developing a standardized front-of-package labeling system for food packages to help consumers, particularly those with lower nutrition knowledge, quickly and easily identify foods that are part of a healthy eating pattern. And by front-of-package, or FOP, for those who might not be aware, this is labeling on the front of food packages that typically provides simplified, at-a-glance information, giving consumers additional context to help them quickly make more informed food choices. There's certainly been a dramatic rise in FOP labeling around the world in recent years. And the Institute of Medicine, now the National Academies of Sciences and Medicine, published reports in 2010 and 2012 that were mandated by Congress, recommending that FDA develop an FOP scheme. And as part of our nutrition efforts, we at FDA, we want to empower consumers' understanding of their dietary choices by providing more informative and accessible labeling. So in today's presentation, I'll review our research activities in this area, note some of the themes that we've heard from the research, outline our engagement to date, and discuss next steps. So we've been reviewing the research on FOP labeling, examining the experiences of other countries that have implemented FOP schemes. We've talked to a number of foreign health officials about their FOP programs and lessons learned. And experiences of other countries around the world suggest that FOP labeling can help people, especially those with lower nutrition knowledge and busy shoppers, to understand nutrition information and to make healthier choices. And this world map is from the Global Food Research Program at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and provides a quick overview of the many places around the globe that have adopted FOP labeling and shows many different designs in use. Some FOP labeling schemes are voluntary, countries in green. Some are mandatory, the countries that are shown in blue. And the schemes used are either usually nutrient focused or can provide a summary indicator of healthfulness. And there can also be varying levels of interpretation provided, typically intended to assist consumers in identifying the healthfulness of a product. One of the most recent schemes finalized and in the process of implementation is in Canada, which has adopted a high-in label approach, which notifies consumers when there's a product high in certain nutrients of concern, as have many Latin South American countries, which often use a black octagon for those nutrients. And FDA's work is driven by science. So we want to benefit from whatever evidence exists or can be generated to make the best scientific and public health decisions. So we've been closely reviewing the literature on FOP labeling for a number of years. And the most recent comprehensive literature review is linked from our FOP website. And our dedicated team has also been very active in conducting consumer research. This includes conducting focus groups last year and this year, and an experimental study this year. This is a very typical process for consumer research at FDA, a combination of focus groups and experimental research. So on the focus groups that we conducted last year, we conducted 12 90-minute focus groups with US adult food shoppers to get participant reactions to 4 FOP scheme categories that you see here. The top left is a guideline daily amount type scheme, and other designs in the different quadrants with additional interpretive elements. And in this initial set of focus groups, we wanted to gain an understanding about what consumers' reactions to these categories, scheme categories were, whether consumers, again, particularly those with lower nutrition knowledge, could use them to quickly and easily identify foods that are part of a healthy eating pattern. And so some of the themes that we heard from the focus groups last year, there were some mixed findings on how much information that participants preferred to be provided in FOP schemes. There was a strong finding that participants believed that the products bearing schemes with high N were not healthy. Participants were confused by the use of red, yellow, and green when schemes contained both nutrients to limit and also nutrients to get enough of. So, for example, participants couldn't easily reconcile using red to convey high sodium and also red to convey low fiber. And there were some mixed reactions to the inclusion of FDA.gov on the schemes. Some participants understood it to mean that the information was not for marketing purposes, but others interpreted it to mean that the product or the ingredients were FDA approved, and some others said that they wouldn't notice it. The results overall helped to inform our proposed experimental study, which I'll turn to now. But some may not be aware that when federal agencies want to collect information from the public, like an experimental study, we're required by the Paperwork Reduction Act to publish notices in the Federal Register to provide the public with the opportunity to comment. And I certainly want to thank everybody who submitted comments to the 2 procedural notices that we issued about our plans for the study. The purpose of the study was to assess participants' ability to use different FOP schemes to evaluate the healthfulness of a food product, with a focus on the nutrients that the dietary guidelines for Americans have identified as nutrients to limit. So sodium, added sugars, saturated fat. It's an online questionnaire, took about 15 minutes to complete. And as is typical for studies like this, it was online only, similar to the approach that we took with research to inform our work on the healthy symbol. There are 9,200 participants. Originally, we'd planned to include 3,000 participants, and many commented to our first procedural notice that this sample size wasn't sufficient, and we agreed and increased it to over 9,000. In terms of demographics, while all demographic groups are affected by diet-related chronic disease, certain groups are at increased risk. And so there are extensive efforts to ensure that groups most at risk for diet-related disease were oversampled to ensure there was adequate representation in the study, including rural populations, racial and ethnic minority groups, those with lower education, and those with lower nutrition knowledge as well. And the experiment was broken into 2 main parts. First, looking at the ability to interpret the schemes themselves, where participants were asked to identify the healthiest and the least healthy nutrient profile within a single scheme. And then the second part focused on evaluating the effectiveness of the schemes, measured in terms of how the participant responded to the product and the label when the scheme appeared on the label of 3 mock products that are shown here: breakfast cereal, frozen meal, and canned soup. And the food product categories included are those that are most highly consumed by many consumers of all economic levels. And there's a wide variety of foods in these categories, which in turn can vary widely in terms of healthfulness. And specifically the questions, the research questions for the study were, are the consumers able to use the FOP schemes to evaluate the healthfulness of a food product? And then which FOP schemes allow consumers to make that evaluation more quickly? Which FO schemes allow consumers to evaluate the healthfulness of the food product without seeking more information? Are consumers able to use the FOP schemes to determine how the food can be included in a healthy dietary pattern? And then are there differences in understanding and use of FOP schemes by demographic categories? So the schemes that were tested in the experimental study were based on insights from our 2022 focus groups, also review and analysis of the scientific literature on FOP labeling, and also review of schemes from other countries, and just highlighting that the scheme categories tested reflect major themes from the literature and schemes in use around the world. So this first scheme here is what's typically referred to as a guideline daily amount scheme. I mentioned one earlier as well, showing left to right versions with the healthiest profile to the least healthy in terms of these nutrients: saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars. And the next scheme, bring it up now, this is an interpretive scheme showing high, medium, and low, the different nutrients with a range of different design elements. You'll see magnifying glass, black and white, color, and there was also another interpretive scheme showing high, medium, and low for the different nutrients. Again, but with the percent daily value, again, with some variation in design with black and white and color. And then finally, another interpretive scheme, high in, with some percent, also with the percent daily value, and some without. And so moving now, 2023 focus groups. Among other things, these focus groups were looking to gauge participant reactions to FOP schemes on mock beverage and also non-beverage food products. And this is intended to complement the experimental study and to help us with the understanding of how consumers react to and interpret various elements of FOP schemes using the mock product as a backdrop. And the FOP schemes on the mock products shown here were the same schemes used in the experimental study that I just showed. And in terms of logistics, there are 15 online focus groups, a total of 90 adults, ages 18 and above. Each were about 90 minutes long, and these were also segmented by education, nutrition, motivation, literacy, and knowledge. And also there was an oversampling of groups at increased risk for diet-related disease. So in terms of themes that we heard, overall, from all the literature, discussions with other countries, and our research thus far, that indicates that an FOP scheme can help consumers identify healthy foods, that consumers prefer simple, interpretive FOP labeling schemes, and the FOP labels appear helpful for those with lower nutrition knowledge, and that FOP complements the nutrition facts label. Additionally, on the experimental study and the second round of focus groups, I can share that the data collection has been completed and we're in the process of analyzing those results. And one pleasant surprise was the participants' reactions to the experimental study. We received quite a bit of spontaneous feedback about how much they enjoyed participating. I can also share that at a high level, our early analysis of the experimental study shows that trends in the results appear consistent across demographic groups. So while the numbers might be different for different groups, the trends appear consistent. Now, in terms of engagement and next steps, we've held numerous engagement with groups over the last year interested in FOP labeling, public health groups, consumer groups, healthcare, medical groups, tribal leaders, industry, trade associations, individual companies, and of course, our federal partners and more. And in the public meeting that we held just last week on ways to reduce added sugars consumption in the US, in the listening sessions, there several participants highlighted the potential for an FOP scheme to assist consumers in identifying the added sugars content of food products and potentially helping them to reduce added sugars intake. And we are committed to ongoing engagement on this topic, and this meeting is an important element of that. I will note that the topics under discussion later reflect many of the themes that we've heard comments on thus far. And so I'm certainly looking forward to hearing those comments to come and to ongoing engagement. No doubt as well, many people are well aware that we took a step of adding a proposed rule on FOP labeling to the unified agenda. I will note that timelines are dependent on a number of factors. So while this work remains a very high priority for us, we are not in a position to be able to provide specific feedback on timelines, given how challenging they can be to predict. And I also want to remind folks that while the results of the experimental study are important to inform any next steps, including a proposed rule for public comment, they're not the only consideration. Also, the scientific literature, discussions with other countries, insights from focus groups, legal considerations, feedback from stakeholders, and more. We've said before, we know from experience that the best decisions come from hearing all points of view, collecting as much data as possible to help lead us in the right direction. So with that, I will say thank you for the opportunity to provide this update, Susan, and I will hand back to you. Thank you.
Excellent. And Robin, thank you so much for leading us through that and providing the insight and the context for the work that the agency is doing. I'll note that we'd had a request to have a link to the website where they could find some of this information. And so we will be posting that to the foundation website to get people to the FDA website so they can see the information.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Robin. So with that, we're going to turn to the next section of our meeting. And as many of you know, all of you know, nutrition labels provide vital information for us to consider about the nutritional content of food and beverages, which empowers consumers to make informed choices to meet their dietary needs and health goals. For the next portion of our meeting, we'll hear from 4 individuals who will share their perspectives regarding nutrition labeling. So I'm going to ask our 4 panelists to come on the mic, the video, come on the screen, and to be ready to speak. I'll introduce you here, and then we're going to start a conversation. And so I'll first say our first panelist alphabetical order is Dr. Lauren Fichtner, who is Director of Nutrition at Mass General Hospital for Children in the Division of Gastroenterology and Nutrition. And she's also an Assistant Professor of Pediatrics at Harvard Medical School and the Senior Health and Research Advisor at the Greater Boston Food Bank. Our second panelist, again, alphabetically, Nancy Glick is the Food and Nutrition Policy Lead at the National Consumers League. Then Dr. Jeffrey Lee is the Assistant Medical Director for FACey Medical Group, a Fellow of the American College of Physicians, and a Certified Professional Coder. Dr. Lee, thank you for joining us. And finally, Lillian C. Steelstra is a stroke survivor and retired certified financial planner. So I've gone through your names and titles, and now we want to hear more from each of you specifically. And so let's start our conversation with you, Lillian. I think it's just so helpful if we think about that very personal experience. Would you remind us of the importance of nutrition information in our day-to-day lives by sharing your story with us?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share. Well, my name is Lillian C. Steelstra, and 13 years ago, I had a little stroke. It's an ischemic stroke, which is basically a clot going to a part of my brain that controls the left side of my body. I'm very lucky that I have no deficits, and I call the stroke my stroke of good luck because I am able to survive. And in fact, I feel in much better shape now. After 13 years of carefully monitoring how much salt I take, how much saturated fat I eat, and making big changes to the way I was living. So it has been a process. It's an ongoing process. Before my stroke, I'm a very busy full-time salesperson. Before my stroke, raising 2 young children, I never really read labels, and it was a good thing our children are very active. And only now that I realize how much sugar I was putting into their bodies when they were running around on the soccer fields. So fortunately, they were active and they were able to burn all of that off. But after the stroke, when I had to learn to monitor the amount of salt I was taking in, I was also on high blood pressure medication for a little while. And I am happy to report that I am no longer on high blood pressure medication because of the changes that I've made, because of the careful monitoring that I do. And very frequently, I used to just buy things without caring what was in them. And now every shopping expedition at the supermarket is an adventure in math. And I say that because I will stand in the aisle and pull out 4 items and compare those nutrition labels side by side, and then go, but wait, this is a 1/4 cup. Wait, that's a 1/2 cup. Now I have to do fractions and go, is this one actually better? Because the percentages weren't really helpful. And so I consider myself slightly educated and informed, and yet it is still taking me time and energy. And if I think back to when I was a working professional, I was so busy. I don't have time to stand at the shop and go, is this one better? Is this one better? Is this one better? And do the math, literally. The one pet peeve area I have, which I would think is more in the manufacturing process as opposed to labeling, but I thought this would be a great opportunity to share, is in the deli meat section. We're all told shop on the outside of the supermarket, and the deli meats section is on the outside. You think you're doing a great job trying to save some money and buy that deli meat and make your own sandwich instead of paying $15 for a sandwich outside. But really, that's an area where the labeling is not very clear. I had to stand and, waste everybody else's time behind me, asking the clerk to say, hey, that big hunk of ham that's in that display? Can you look at the plastic packaging around it and tell me, is there salt in the ham? And of course there is. Nobody realizes and nobody stops to ask because we're all busy. We all want to just get the food and go home and feed the kids and go on with our lives. But 2 ounces, and that's really 2 little tiny slices of ham or turkey or whatever have you, 2 ounces. The lowest one that I could find in that shop was 35% of our day's salt value. And the average sandwich has at least 6 to 8 slices. So in one sandwich, we could already have exceeded our daily salt intake if we use that 2,000 calorie intake model. What shocked me more is when we travel, my husband and I, we go to local supermarkets to buy their deli meats and their cheeses and their breads because that's a cheaper way to travel than to eat at fancy restaurants all the time. In France and Croatia is where it stands out because I had to use Google Translate to scan the labels, and I go, oh my God, is something wrong? 100 grams of their average packaged deli meats only has 15% of salt value. So this is in the manufacturing process. But 100 grams is 3.5 ounces. Now I have to do the math, 3.5 ounces versus 2 ounces and make it all equal. Wait, that is still lower salt. And I get more meat, less salt. This is in the manufacturing process. There's some people out here who may have some say in how things get manufactured. I hope that helps. It's my pet peeve topic for now because I am concerned about how much salt we're taking. So much so now I actually make my own sandwich meats. I don't buy what is processed out there because I don't know. And I don't want to waste all the other customers' time making the counter staff, check every label for me, and then I do the math. It is possible to make changes to one's health. It is a time-consuming process. It is a concerted effort required. And I just want to encourage people who are listening to share that it is possible to make the changes. And it just means being more mindful, paying attention, and this whole topic about front of label packaging, making things simpler for the average busy consumer. Imagine the mother working with 2 toddlers in the shopping cart standing at the supermarket. You're not going to check the 4 different types of juice packets to see which one has less sugar. So I'm not at that stage anymore. Happily, my kids are grown and healthy. And I'm here to share that, I think our steps towards better labeling is getting better. I used to think, wow, a package of potato chips is only 180 calories. No, that's only 6 potato chips. If you eat the whole package, it's 480 calories. And that's where the improvement is. I see in some packages now, 1 portion and the whole package. Things are moving in the right direction. So that's all I have, and I'm happy to answer more questions if necessary.
Yeah. Lillian, that was delightful as you gave us a poignant phrase of adventures in math, and then the underscoring of how just the efficiency and trying to be more diligent can be challenging, and how efficiency can make a difference. And as your mention of being a working professional and having young kids, it's as if I were going to turn to Dr. Fichtner yet next, because Lauren, you look at this topic, I was going to say 3 different angles, but I think it's 4 different angles, as a pediatrician, as a parent, as a leader of an evidence-based pediatric weight management clinic that's recognized by the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics, and as an advisor to the food bank, which tells me that you are thinking about nutrition and nutrition labeling more than the average bear, and are thinking through things. So would you share your thoughts on nutrition labeling for your individual patients and parents in your clinic, and from more of a procurement perspective from the food bank?
Yeah, Lillian, that was so inspiring. And as a mother of 2, shopping is really time consuming, and the math is very, very difficult. And I will just also say my kids are interested in the labels too and understanding them. So I'm really excited about the prospect of simple labels that we can teach our children as parents too, as we move down those shopping aisles with 2 toddlers screaming and wanting a lot of extra stuff in that shopping cart. But as a pediatrician who focuses on gastroenterology and nutrition, reading food labels can be incredibly difficult, as Lillian just shared. It's very difficult for my patients to understand what they're feeding their children. I often get questions on how to read them, what aspects are we supposed to focus on for either themselves, or often they see my title as director of nutrition and they say, hey, doctor, I have hypertension. How do I read this label? So that can be really time consuming in a short visit when I have a lot of other things to talk about as well. In addition, many of my patients rely on our dietitians to teach them how to understand nutrition labels, and they are an incredible resource to my practice and to my patients. But we know registered dietitians are really hard to come by, even at an academic large health center like my own. And then in places where I do work in rural Mississippi, we can't find registered dietitians in some towns. So patients really don't have access to this expertise. As Susan mentioned, I've been really fortunate enough to develop an evidence-based pediatric weight management intervention over the last 11 years with the American Academy of Pediatrics. And as part of that work, we actually explored with families what they wanted to learn from a pediatric weight management intervention. And they wanted a group curriculum. They wanted to come together with other families to learn how best to learn healthy lifestyles for their children and for their families for a lifelong health. And resoundingly, I was shocked. They really wanted to learn how to read nutrition labels. So this became the last topic of our group curriculum. And it's sort of the mastery level of all the nutrition knowledge they've learned and all the health behavioral lifestyle intervention pieces they've learned. And so it's incredible that that is what they wanted. But this is because nutrition labels are so complex. We also know that those who respond to our intervention best have learned how to read nutrition labels, just like Lillian has, and her story is incredible. And so I think it's really important we make these simpler. Finally, from my work as a senior health and research advisor at the Greater Boston Food Bank, we are one of the first food banks to have a nutritional policy, and we use the supporting wellness at pantries that ranks our food in the green, yellow, red situation, just like we just learned from Robin, based on sugar, salt, and saturated fat. We're lucky enough, again, to have a resource of registered dietitians who review all the food that comes into our warehouse and ranks it according to what we're procuring, and works with our food acquisition team to really understand what they're ordering as well. So when this food gets to the client, it's as healthy as possible. So making nutrition labels easier to understand could really help the charitable food assistance program more easily categorize and distribute healthier options for their clients, especially those food pantries who do not have access to registered dietitians. And then in addition, food pantries are often asked by their clients, what of these items is healthiest for me and for my chronic illness? And I think that can also help the clients best understand when they are at a food pantry, what is best for their hypertension and for their chronic medical conditions. So thanks again for having me, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
So Lauren, that was really helpful in both showing us that there is interest in and an appetite for, understanding nutrition labels. And then I'm struck in the food bank perspective that while we have helpful programs in some of the more traditional places where we look at nutrition information, we should remember that there are there are places other than grocery stores where individuals access food. And so can we make sure that the nutrition information is easier to reach there as well? So thank you. Dr. Lee, I'm going to turn to you next as past president of the LA County Medical Association. And I know you've said that in your practice, you too are working with individuals and how you hear from them about their journeys, I guess I would say, with nutrition labels. Please share with us your insights.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you to the foundation for inviting me to share my experience. I am a primary care physician taking care of adults, and I've seen the effects of diet-related disease and obesity. And it's really important that my patients, the public, have access to better information on nutritional content. I believe that currently we have the easiest availability to the most palatable, or you might say hyper palatable food in all of history. I'll commonly tell my patients, I think that the cheapest food we have today tastes better than what kings and queens used to eat like 100 years ago. So our food tastes better than ever, and all that collective knowledge on how to make food taste better, it's great to eat, but then it's had the detrimental consequences that we've talked about: high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, cancer. Also things that patients may not be as aware about, things like arthritis, fatty liver disease, depression, dementia, and pain. And when I take care of patients who have these conditions, a lot of times they express that they've had real difficulty in understanding what's best for their health to eat. When they're picking out food, they're making choices very rapidly and spontaneously. And in this day and age, we all suffer from some amount of decision fatigue. It's hard to make good decisions when you don't have good information, and for you to have to go out and look for that information is really hard. And that's competing with the marketing and the packaging for highly processed, unhealthy foods. Oftentimes, these products have words like nature or nutritious or real or low or whole or vitamins, and it makes the sense that those are healthier than they actually are. And that's such a difficult situation for patients to be in, to try and figure out what's objective scientific information versus what is kind of spin or marketing. And Lillian had the great example. I'll just give another example. Your average sports drink, if you look at the nutrition facts, it says 80 calories. What you don't realize is that it has 2.5 servings. So that's 2.5 times the calories that they're taking in. I mean, who only drinks 40% of a bottle and saves the rest for later? Of course, you're going to drink the whole bottle. So it's the labeling needs to be simple and easy to access for patients, so they understand what foods they're consuming, so they can make the best decisions for their own health.
Dr. Lee, you gave us another phrase here as we're thinking about the why in improving nutrition labeling, and that's decision fatigue. So thank you. I'm collecting. I've got one so far from each of you, but appreciate the orientation of the importance for your adult patients and some of the dynamics there. So we've been talking a lot about the very personal, patient, health-oriented importance of nutrition labeling. I want to turn to you, Nancy, for more of that policy level. The work you do at the National Consumers League is at that policy level, and share with us, what do you see as important from that higher level policy perspective?
Well, thank you. And I'm so glad to come at the end of this because I agree with everybody. So I was very literal in how I sort of addressed this, because it was like, why does nutrition labeling matter? So I wanted to answer that question. And there are two reasons, I think, that are important, whether it's on the back of the whole label or front of pack. One is that it allows people to have information to make informed decisions and compare. And the second, which I think is really important, is when FDA requires something like added sugars on a label, industry responds. And there's incredible data about what happened after FDA changed the labeling for fat and saturated fat, and the reformulations that resulted from that. Same with added sugars. So labeling is not only helpful for us in terms of understanding how to be better consumers, but it actually improves the products, or at least some of the products. So we think with that in mind, it's very important to get it right. And I had I asked myself, so if we go back in time to 1994, how are we doing? Do consumers value the label? And the answer is yes, they do. Both USDA and FDA do regular monitoring of use of labeling. And in about 2005, 62% of the public was using labels. Now it's 87%. So it is ubiquitous. People expect it, whether or not it provides everything they want. They know it's there, and they know that they can take one bottle and another bottle and compare numbers, even if they need a calculator like Lydia did. So we think that's very important because we look at this in terms of consumers want it, they're using it, so how do we make it better? And one of the things I also asked is, so has the world changed in a better way, even with the deficits in labeling? And the answer there is yes as well. There was excuse me for looking, but there was a study that was in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine, and it was a study where they were very large analysis of use of labeling and how there was improvements in health. And I'll just read you some of the results of that. The use of the label reduced the intake of calories by 6.6%, total fat by 10.6%, and other generally unhealthy choices by 13%, and also increased vegetable intake by 13.5%. So in a perfect world, we know that we have it's a tool, people are using it, and some of them are benefiting in terms of better health. Of course, I'm interested in the fact that the doctors on this panel are counseling, because one of the things that I learned in doing my research is the AMA has an entire curriculum around this. So doctors do validate the importance of the food label. So does the nutrition labeling matter? Yes, it does. So now into the policy parts of it. So to some extent, our view is that, there's the unintended consequences of everything. So for example, we were very pleased about the changes in added sugars, but here's the problem. Many of the products were reformulated with artificial sweeteners, but there is no labeling right now to tell you what those artificial sweeteners are. And we're concerned about that. So we look at the fact that there's a holistic part to the story and very specific parts. Our basic concerns have to do with what was talked about as the most important things people look at, which is sodium, fat, calories, nutrient density, and the daily value. And in our comments on the healthy claim, we told FDA that we don't think that the levels of sodium that FDA now permits are low enough. We think that the American Heart Association's recommendations of 6% of the intake is more appropriate than 10. We also are, as I said, we're concerned about the amount of fat, and we concur with the fact that there should be 10% of calories per day. And with added sugars, imagine the fact that 58% of Americans now consume, we consume the most sugar in the world. I guess we all knew that. But again, the American Heart Association has recommendations that are lower than what FDA has. So we would like to encourage FDA to recognizing that the food industry responds to try to go lower with some of these things. The other thing that we're concerned about are some of these innovative foods. We talked about this a little bit, and like the plant-based milks and the plant-based meats. Sounds great, but there are the number of ingredients it takes to make a, quote, hamburger out of something that is a plant is incredible. And we do not know what are in these products. And right now, there are no requirements to do this. And we, in fact, put together a consensus panel and submitted comments to FDA about this, because we think that, as the food industry continues to innovate, there are always going to be new things. And labeling needs to constantly adapt so that we're able to, use this tool appropriately. And finally, if we get to front of pack, I think our most concern, there's not much real estate. And the focus groups show that, there's a lot of concern what high means, what low means, and colors. But I think what we really feel is we must communicate what a nutrient-dense food is.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we can do that simply, people understand that this is a food that is giving me more of the nutrients I need. And daily value, I think, is like, wow, you pretty much need a PhD to get that. So since we use it in all of these things, we need to figure out a better way to communicate that. So that's my big picture.
Nancy, thank you. You've given us, you remind us, I think what your phrase to underscore from that is that labeling matters, and that
I took you seriously.
Yeah, labeling matters. That's a good thing. So let's continue the conversation a bit. Dr. Lee, I want to turn to you. Are there tools that you found helpful for your patients in your practice as they're thinking and looking and either doing the math or trying to compare?
And so there are a lot of tools out there about nutrition, whether it's just, the internet, social media, and YouTube. You can watch all these videos on nutrition, but the problem is there's just as much, if not more, bad information than good information. And that's really difficult because having a trusted source of information that you can rely on is very difficult. Patients are hearing oftentimes conflicting things about what they should be eating. And so it is difficult. And then at the point of purchase, when they're in the market, a lot of the tools just are not, I think, efficient enough when you're out there just pulling things off of the shelf. You're in there because you got stuff to do. If you're doing the shopping, you're going and, pulling out your phone and then trying to look something up is really impractical.
Yeah, that's, it's really helpful to remind us then, because Commissioner Califf has said quite often that he's worried about misinformation and misunderstanding of products. To even think about nutrition and nutrition labeling in front of pack is one of the most powerful tools against misinformation, right? Because you would have the information right there. Yeah.
Agreed. That would be authoritative and very clear.
Yeah. And you talked about efficiency, which makes me think of Lillian, because I can hear her talking about, I'm trying to compare and trying to do other things. Are there nutrition tools that you use or you wished you might use? You told us a bit about kind of doing the math, so separate from a calculator. Are there tools that you might use or think about in crafting a healthier lifestyle?
Well, after my stroke, I started volunteering with the American Heart Association, and Nancy brought up their standards, and those were very helpful for me to learn, like, what amount of salt should I be consuming a day? How much sugar should I be consuming a day? I think, there's a lot of wizardry in your phone these days. Like, Dr. Lee mentioned, you can go find an app. Someone in the comment chats just mentioned that there's their guiding stars or something. So there are definitely tools out there. But what I think for me, a bigger tool is having a shopping list so that you're prepared before you go into the store, and instead of randomly just pulling stuff off. In my old life, pre-stroke, I would just go in and pick whatever, as cheapest, fastest, and get out and get on my day without thinking at all. And now, surprisingly, I have more time being retired, but I still make an effort to make a list and then stick to the list. And on the days when I stick to my list, because I never stick to my list, there's always this other thing calling out to me going, oh, try this cracker. Oh, try this cheese because it goes really well with your wine. But it's having that list to help you focus and knowing what nutrition you want to put in your body. And that takes a lot of learning. It was through the Heart Association that I went to attend classes on nutrition, that I learned that my taste buds refresh every 3 weeks and I can learn to accept new tastes. So there's a lot of learning involved in the last 13 years. It hasn't been easy. And if I can give any suggestion, is to focus on one thing at a time. You can focus on saturated fat for this year and then focus on salt the next year. Obviously you want to do all simultaneously, but to try and change everything at once is just going to be too mind-boggling, and you will feel defeated and you can't do it. It takes time, it takes process, and for the doctors who counsel patients, you know, it really does take time. And if they would just give it that focus for 6 months, a year, it can happen. I'm actually from Singapore originally, and I just came back from a trip from Singapore. And so, you know, earlier it was mentioned that the people in Singapore are living longer than the people in the US. And I wonder, if I didn't live in the US for the last 30 years, maybe I might not have had heart issues. But that's all in theory. What I did notice was the front of package in some of the products on the supermarket shelves in Singapore. And I have to say, and it's not a foreign country to me, so it's not a strange language or anything, but it was so easy to sift through and say, oh, don't want that one, too much red in front. Oh, okay, I'll look at this one instead. It did simplify and save me a little bit of time. It helped me narrow down from the 17 different things down to 3 that I would pick out and say, okay, I'm going to look at these 2. And for those products that didn't have the front of package labels, I didn't even bother, because, hey, if they're not going to help me out, I'm not going to patronize them. Long answer. I'm not sure if I got anywhere. Sorry.
You did, Lillian, because you spoke about the discipline and then looking at, and I think what's important from a labeling perspective is that then that information was there for you to see and to evaluate. I want to turn, Nancy, I know you covered a whole lot of things in your piece. Is there anything you want to add as a quick hit? And then Dr. Fichtner, I'm actually going to give you the last word in this panel. But Nancy, what would you like to share?
Well, I think I sort of covered most of it, but I do like what USDA did with My Plate. I think that was very, very helpful, because people could see a diet and not just of food. And I do think that as part of what we do, we need to make sure that we are, you know, when you're making decisions, you're not just buying pickles, you know. So I think to the extent we can sort of help people bring the two together, that would be very helpful.
Nancy, that's a great point, that we may be evaluating something on a individual perspective, but then it becomes part of a plate that we might use, or for those of us without the time for a plate, at least consuming more than one thing at one time as we stand at our desks, which we do not recommend. Lauren, I want to turn to you. What's the highest need you see in nutrition labeling?
Well, that's a good question. I feel like actually I would echo what Nancy is saying, is that this holistic approach of the diet and nutrient density as a, you know, this is a whole diet, this is your whole plate, as USDA focuses on. And really, it's not just the single ingredients, but it's the whole picture of this. And yeah, I think as food insecurity rises and the cost of food has really gone up, I think we know that 85% of those with food insecurity are going to the cheapest foods available. If they could see that cheapest food and see that they're also getting really good nutrients, I think we could prevent a lot of chronic illness.
That is a great way, and it actually intersects well with a question we had about how all of this comes together, because it's not only are we consuming more than one product at a time, there are factors other than nutrition information that affect what we are able to purchase and to use. So we challenged the 4 of you to help paint a picture of why nutrition labeling is important. You've been so powerful from helping us think about the adventures in math of some of the current challenge, therefore the need for improvement, to underscoring that there actually is an appetite for information, that is what parents want to see if they're trying to help a child navigate something, to Dr. Lee's decision fatigue, that we're trying to figure out what and where, and then Nancy reminding us that labeling matters, That's why we want to think about nutrition labeling. So I have to say, Dr. Fichtner, Dr. Lee, Lillian, and Nancy, thank you for joining us and doing that stage setting. We're now going to let you step aside, and we're going to turn to the public comment period of the meeting. So thank you all so much. Now I have to cover some logistics so that we get ready for the public comment component. And this is the public comment for those who pre-registered. I'll note we were able to accommodate the speaking requests from every organization who requested a speaking slot. And we're going to hear comments in 3 categories. First, design considerations, such as placement and color. Then a category of potential intersection with other nutrition-related policies, such as labeling efforts and nutrition assistance programs. And third, international experiences with front of package labeling. So let me run through some of the logistics here. This will all be much easier for folks who are later in the public comment period, but we want to go through the rules at least a couple of times, or at least the parameters. So I'm going to call on you in alphabetical order of the organization's name within that category where you are speaking. And I'm going to list our upcoming speakers in groups of 3. So you will have a bit of advance notice of your appearance, and you're going to hear your name a couple of times as I have a rolling group of 3 that I introduce. The raise hand function should now be working, and I'm going to just use that as my cue to the tech team that I hope that it is. If it isn't, we will find out something else to do. But when your name is called, use the raise hand function, then it will be easier for our team to find you so that we can turn on, make your audio and video available to the webinar, and a reminder that you will need to have your video turned on and be unmuted. Each speaker is going to have 2 minutes. There will be a countdown clock that displays on screen that displays the time remaining, and you will be muted when the clock hits 0. If you have not begun speaking within 10 seconds of your name being called, we will move on to the next commenter. So if you see the clock, if I weren't already speaking, someone would have jumped in and moved on. Now, I'll also note each presenter had the option of preparing 1 slide to share. That slide is teed up to display when you are making remarks. And finally, this is our time to listen to you. We, being the foundation, FDA, the panelists, all of the individuals on the webinar, we are listening. We will not provide a response to comments, but rather we are actively gathering your input. So let's begin with our first category for comments, which is design considerations, such as placement and color. Our first 3 speakers will be Susan Bishop, Dr. Zach Froelich, and Sarah Brandmeier. So Susan Bishop from the American Heart Association, you are on deck and you get the least amount of notice of any of the public commenters. So I am going to tap dance just a bit until we see you prepared and ready to present. Let's turn to Susan's slide and we will prepare to start the timer. Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you. My name is Susan Bishop, and I am the Director of Federal Regulatory Affairs for the American Heart Association. I'd like to start by expressing AHA's strong support for the development of a mandatory front-of-package nutrition labeling system. A front-of-pack system based on the best available science and consumer research can help consumers make healthier choices. AHA recommends that FDA focus on a front-of-pack system that is required to appear on all foods and beverages, is nutrient-specific, highlighting the amount of added sugars, sodium, and saturated fat, includes calories, includes interpretive elements to help consumers better understand the nutritional content of the product, and uses a simple design that is easy to understand, including for consumers with lower literacy. The FOP system must also be attention-grabbing, so it stands out on the product package. During discussions AHA had with groups of consumers, participants said that some of the current voluntary FOP systems blend in with the product packaging or look simply like another design element on the package. To ensure that the FOP system stands out, FDA should consider using icons or imagery, such as a magnifying glass, to draw attention to the FOP label. Select either a multicolored red, yellow, green, or black and white color scheme. Other monochromatic color schemes, such as a blue FOP label on a blue package, should not be allowed. The FOP label should also appear where eye tracking data show it is optimally seen by consumers and is generally in the same place on every product package. Most importantly, the FOP systems should be standardized so there is a consistent look and placement on all packages. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. Let me run our list. We'll hear from Dr. Zach Froelich, Sarah Brandmeier, and Tom Gremion. Actually, it's Thomas Gremion. Sorry about that, Thomas. We'll now hear from Dr. Zach Froelich from Auburn University. Dr. Froelich?
Thank you. My name is Zach Froelich. I have a PhD from MIT in Science and Technology Studies, and I'm currently an associate professor of history at Auburn University. I have spent the last 15 years researching and writing about the history of the FDA, and I just finished a book on this titled From Label to Table, which describes the history of FDA policies on food standards and food labeling from the 1930s to present. And what I want to do is direct you to the lower right on my slide. I won't read the quote, but I have a quote here from Berkey Belser, who was head of the design firm that worked on the FDA's 1990s Nutrition Facts panel. And here he was explaining to me in an interview in 2009 the power of the FDA Nutrition Facts panel as a government brand, saying that its appearance on all packaging meant consumers would understand and absorb it in ways that supersede reading. And I think this is a really key insight. Understanding how consumers use this label is not just about how they consciously read it. He would even characterize the current initiative on front of package labeling as a form of extending the brand. So why is this important? One reason is that I think the black and white design is important to the persuasive power of the label as being considered objective information. It says this is not advertising. The designers for my book cover took advantage of this. It sort of leaps out and draws your attention to it in contrast with very colorful food marketing that we would see on other packaging. Second, I worry there is a compartmentalization of different policies at the FDA about the food label that doesn't address how consumers actually use labels. Every time I speak about the history of FDA nutrition labeling, my audiences ask me about ingredients labels. And this is because consumers see the two as linked in how they think about healthy. So I want to see how the FDA is going to address this. And then finally, my work complicates the idea that reforming food systems can be solved best by improving labels. Every label system has been gamed by bad faith actors, and I think we need to make sure we have staff dedicated to identifying this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Froelich. So adding to my list, Brandmeier, Gremion, Dr. Christina Roberto would be third in line. Let's turn now to Sarah Brandmeier from Consumer Brands Association. Sarah?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Brandmeier, Director of Regulatory and Technical Affairs at the Consumer Brands Association. Consumer Brands thanks the Reagan-Udall Foundation for hosting this public meeting on front of package or FOP labeling. Consumer Brands champions the industry whose products Americans depend on every day, representing nearly 2,000 iconic brands, including food and beverage products. Facts Upfront, or FUF, a voluntary industry-led initiative, has been in the marketplace for more than a decade and puts key nutritional information from the Nutrition Facts Panel, or NFP, right on the front of its food packaging. Industry has embraced FUF, and the program has evolved over time. In fact, to align more closely with the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, or DGAs, and the revised NFP, we've recently released an update to the FUF style guide to include an added sugars icon. We urge FDA to include calories in the FOP schemes to be tested. As research has shown that calories are what consumers look for most often on nutrition labels, FDA's stated goal to reduce diet-related chronic disease can best be achieved by giving consumers calorie information as part of any FOP scheme. Additionally, a calories icon would provide a relevant practical option for small packages where a complete FOP graphic is not feasible. FDA should take a holistic approach to the labeling of a food's nutritional profile, including addressing both positive nutrients and nutrients to limit, allowing consumers to make more informed choices based upon the total nutrient contributions of a food. An exclusive focus on nutrients to limit will not help consumers identify the better or more nutrient-dense choice. This would be in line with the DGAs, which focuses on both positive nutrients and nutrients to limit. Consumer Brands prefers the use of a monochromatic scheme. Research from Health Canada shows that the use of a monochromatic scheme is both effective and efficient. Further, currently there are no mandatory policies globally that include a color-coded traffic light system. Development of a FOP labeling system would be the most significant nutrition labeling initiative since nutrition label reform. Consumer Brands is a partner in this effort, as shown by our longstanding commitment to the Facts Up Front program. Any proposed FOP labeling system must be developed in a transparent manner with stakeholder input, focus on real tangible outcomes for consumers, and needs to be done within the confines of FDA's statutory and constitutional authority. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So adding to our queue, we have Gremillon, Roberto, and then Elizabeth Orland as our new person who is up. So I'll turn now to Thomas Gremillon from the Consumer Federation of America. Thomas, are you with us and ready to speak? Okay, Thomas, I am moving on. So our next queue, we have Dr. Christina Roberto, Elizabeth Orland, and then Dr. Jim Krieger, your latest in the queue. Dr. Christina Roberto, are you with us? And ready to provide remarks from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Healthy Eating Research National Program. Dr. Roberto?
Thank you. I'm an associate professor of health policy at the University of Pennsylvania, and I've studied food and nutrition labeling for 15 years. I strongly support FDA's pursuit of a front-of-package labeling system. There's ample scientific evidence that such labels, when well-designed, help consumers make informed choices. Based on my own research and the other scientific literature, I strongly recommend that the FDA front-of-pack nutrition labeling system be mandatory, include nutrient-specific information about added sugars, sodium, saturated fat, and calories per serving, and be simple and easy to understand, so even a kid could use it to encourage their parents to buy healthy foods. To achieve that, the research is clear that the most effective labeling systems have the following components. They avoid numbers and percentages and instead use other methods to help consumers quickly understand the nutritional profile of a product, such as the FDA's proposal to have the words high in added sugars or high in sodium without any percentages, versus the voluntary industry Facts Up Front system, which has numbers and percentages. They use recognizable pictures or images like yield signs with an exclamation point to grab consumer attention and reinforce the information, and they avoid the inclusion of nutrients to encourage, such as fiber and protein, which can leave consumers with the impression that a product is healthy when its overall nutritional profile is poor. Finally, the label should have standardized placement, so it must appear on the front of the package, as opposed to the top or other places, which can happen now with the industry's voluntary Facts Up Front labeling system. I'm grateful to the FDA for moving this policy forward. Americans need clear and transparent information about their food supply, and a simple front-of-package nutrition label, as opposed to the current ineffective Facts Up Front label, will give them that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roberto. Adding to my queue, following Orland and Krieger, is Michelle Matto. So let's turn next to Elizabeth Orland from the Global Health Advocacy Incubator. You should now have access to video and audio. Elizabeth?
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Elizabeth Orland. I'm the Associate Director for Research at the Global Health Advocacy Incubator in Washington, D.C. I want to highlight several attributes that can make an effective FOP label according to country experiences and recent evidence. These include being mandatory, black and white, and a standardized size, containing symbols that can be used for quick grocery store decision-making and without numbers to foster equity, focus only on nutrients of concern, for example, high in sugar, be developed based on existing science, have FDA endorsement for credibility, and be based on a standard measurement to facilitate comparison, as mentioned by previous panelists. Promising initial evaluations in countries with high-in labels have shown significant reductions in the calories, sugar, sodium, and saturated fat content consumed. In contrast, studies have shown that the traffic light labels, red, yellow, green color, can cause confusion and have not been shown to decrease decisions to purchase unhealthy foods. For example, I show the nutrient profile of Lucky Charms cereal. This low, medium, and high nutrient profile model is very confusing for consumers and can trick them into believing low levels of some nutrients of concern can counteract the harms of high levels of other nutrients of concern, as found in the FDA study. By comparison, the high-in front-of-pack label provides the consumer with clear and accurate information on which nutrients of concern are in high levels, like this high-in added sugar label on the right. Therefore, we as the Global Health Advocacy Incubator recommend FDA considers a high-in label, like the simple label on the right, proposed for research by the Center for Science and the Public Interest as a quicker and more effective way to display which nutrients of concern are present in food products. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And we will now turn, let me do our order, Kruger, Matto, and Sully. So Chris Sully, you are the addition to the order. Let's turn now to Dr. Jim Krieger from Healthy Food America. Dr. Krieger, are you with us and ready to present?
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes, go ahead.
Great. Hi, thank you for hosting the meeting. I'm Jim Krieger. I'm clinical professor of public health and medicine at University of Washington and executive director of Healthy Food America, an NGO that advocates for healthy food policy. As we've seen, evidence shows that effective labels are mandatory and use simple interpretive icons that are easily seen and understood by consumers and placed in the same high visibility location. Icon labels work better than text-only labels. This is especially true for diverse consumers with low literacy, numeracy, or English language skills. And in particular, numeric labels are harder to understand, and studies show they're less effective than nutrient warnings or traffic light labels. One FDA-proposed label option, the simplest and best in my estimation, is on my slide, but next to it's a potentially even more effective label from a discrete choice experiment that I recently completed. We pre-tested multiple labels. This icon label with an exclamation mark discouraged parents from purchasing a sugary drink for their child more than a text-only one. And in the actual experiment, it reduced the choice of beverage high in added sugar by 45% relative to no label. These findings are consistent with many other studies which have found that icon labels outperform text labels. Next, labels should be mandatory. Otherwise, there's a risk of inconsistent use by industry. If a fruit drink is marketed with a natural claim, would it also have a high in sugar label? Natural claims lead parents to underestimate the amount of added sugars in fruit drinks. And then labels should only include nutrients of concern. Adding additional healthier quote-unquote nutrients makes them hard to understand and interpret. And finally, labels should address the increased use of non-sugar sweeteners because the growing evidence shows negative long-term effects, including diabetes and heart disease. And the effects on children are largely unknown. Early life exposure to sweetness encourages lifelong taste preferences. Mexico, Colombia, and Argentina include a sweetener label with advice to avoid among children, and I think we should do that here as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Krieger. So in our queue now, I'm actually going to go back and add our third speaker in the queue will be Thomas Gremillon. We have found you, Thomas, and we'll fit you in third. But next, I'm going to turn to Michelle Matto from the International Dairy Foods Association, who will be followed by Chris Sully and then Thomas Gremillon. So Michelle, are you with us and ready to present?
I am, yes.
Excellent. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Matto, Associate Vice President for Regulatory Affairs and Nutrition at the International Dairy Foods Association, which represents companies that make most of the dairy products and ingredients marketed in the United States. IDFA believes that any proposed mandatory front-of-pack scheme must be grounded in scientific evidence, developed in a transparent manner with stakeholder input, and focus on tangible outcomes for consumers. Further, prior to implementing a mandatory front-of-pack scheme, the agency should establish metrics to measure public health impact or success. Front-of-pack labeling should not de-emphasize the nutrition information provided on the nutrition facts label, nor should the selected scheme be viewed as a warning label to consumers, cautioning them about eating a particular food versus helping them to identify healthful choices. If front-of-pack focuses on just a few nutrients to limit, the full nutrient profile of a food may be misrepresented. We also recommend that the agency avoid using nutrient content claim language such as high in or low in as part of front-of-pack schemes. It is extremely difficult to provide comments to inform the agency's rulemaking without understanding the results of the consumer research FDA has conducted. FDA should release the complete results of their consumer research before proceeding with any further rulemaking. The data FDA will use to perform the cost-benefit analysis for its front-of-pack rule should be identified and made available to the public. An accelerated rulemaking process could result in unintended consequences, including discouraging the consumption of nutrient-rich foods and beverages that are recommended by the Dietary Guidelines for Americans. With that in mind, we urge the agency to issue an advance notice of proposed rulemaking as the first step, following precedent for other significant labeling changes. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to comment today.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So let me remind where we are in our queue. We'll hear from Chris Sully, then Thomas Gremillon, and then Dr. Caitlin Boone. I'll remind folks that as I call your name, go ahead and raise your hand early. We will unmute you and allow you to speak only when it is your turn, but you can raise your hand ahead of time after I've called your name. So Chris Sully from the International Food Information Council, are you with us, Chris, and ready to speak?
I am.
Excellent. Please proceed.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Sully. I'm from the International Food Information Council. One of our primary objectives at IFIC is conducting consumer research. This fall, we conducted a survey of 3,000 Americans that included experimental exercises designed to assess consumer interpretation and application of proposed FDA FOP schemes and facts up front. I'm excited to share early highlights of our data collection that are relevant to FOP design considerations. Displaying calorie and fiber information, in addition to saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars, helped more people correctly identify the healthiest choice. Specifically, we observed significant differences between groups exposed to variations of the FDA's proposed GDA FOP scheme. Conversely, including calorie and fiber information in FOP schemes also helped more people correctly identify the least healthy choice. Specifically, we observed significant improvements in groups exposed to calorie information on FDA's proposed Nutrition Info and Nutrition Info with DV FOP schemes. Overall, more people were able to correctly identify the healthiest choice than correctly identify the least healthy choice. Now, time is a critical element to consider, so we measured the time taken to select the healthiest choice and the least healthy choices. Our survey respondents took twice as much time to select the healthiest option as they took to select the least healthy option. And finally, when comparing groups exposed to facts up front and the FDA's proposed high-end FOP scheme while on food products, the groups exposed to facts up fronts reported being more satisfied with the information displayed, especially when calorie and fiber information was included. We look forward to sharing the full results of IFIC's FOP study with FDA and other stakeholders that support our mission to help Americans building healthier eating patterns that align with science-driven food policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So we're going to return to Thomas Gremillon, and following that will be Dr. Caitlin Boone and Farida Mohammad Ashah. So Thomas, I think we now have found you, and are you ready to present?
Yes.
Excellent.
My name is Thomas Gremillon. I'm the Director of Food Policy at Consumer Federation of America, and we appreciate the opportunity to comment here. We appreciate FDA and the Biden administration's prioritization of front-of-pack labeling, and particularly the objective outlined in the National Strategy on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health on reaching lower nutrition literacy consumers. And in reality, we're all lower nutrition literacy consumers under sufficiently taxing demands on our time and attention. And FDA will do well to keep its front package labeling rules simple and consistent, as has been stressed by other presenters. Making the rules mandatory is a prerequisite for consistency. In the related area of alcoholic beverage labeling, we have seen how voluntary labeling rules are an abject failure. One of the main benefits of an effective front-of-pack labeling scheme is that they make actionable nutrition information accessible to consumers. And in addition to making sure that information is available on all the packaged food items, it should be highly visible and unambiguous. And toward that end, it should not include some indicators for bad things like added sugars and fats, and others for good things like vitamin C or fiber. The research is clear that indicators of unhealthfulness best support healthier choices across the full spectrum of foods. And related to that, just an aside, FDA really should not waste more time and resources on a healthy icon. Finally, FDA should look into disclosing non-sugar sweeteners, because the reformulation is going to push that. And we have below our preferred design. Thank you so much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Thomas. We appreciate it. So We have in the queue, Dr. Caitlin Boone, then Farida Mohammed Shah, and Dr. Anna Grumman. So let's turn now to Dr. Caitlin Boone from Mars Incorporated. Dr. Boone, are you with us and prepared to speak?
I am, thank you.
Excellent.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I serve as U.S. Public Affairs Director for Health and Nutrition at Mars Incorporated. And Mars is supportive of the process that FDA is following to create effective, science-based front-of-pack labeling that will empower consumers to support healthy dietary patterns. And we thank FDA and the Reagan-Udall Foundation for this opportunity to comment. Drawing from our past experience, we believe it's critical for FDA to include a factual declaration of calories per serving in front-of-pack labeling. Mars and many others have utilized front-of-pack calorie labeling to ensure compliance with the vending machine rule, as well as providing consumers with easily accessible information. And we believe that in practice, if FDA does not include calorie information in a future scheme, industry would need to use both the FDA-developed label as well as a facts upfront calorie label to ensure compliance with vending machine rules going forward. We think this would be challenging to implement given the limited size of vended products. And like many manufacturers, we do not create separate packaging for vending. So this labeling approach would broadly impact individual serving packs. Mars also urges FDA to consider the feasibility of front-of-pack labels for very small packages or products that contribute insignificant nutritional content, and to consider exemptions or alternative formats for those types of products. Finally, as this is the first time FDA may define medium, Mars encourages FDA to consider the intersections of the definition of medium with labeling standards such as healthy, as well as how medium is understood by consumers. So thank you again for this opportunity to provide input.
Thank you, Caitlin. So our queue now is Farida Mohammed Shah, Dr. Anna Grumman, and Dr. Nadine Gracia. Farida from the National Confectioners Association, are you with us and prepared to speak?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Please proceed.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment on behalf of the National Confectioners Association, or NCA, which represents the interests of the U.S. confectionery industry. Our members support transparent nutrition information to help consumers make informed choices. There are three design elements for a front-of-pack labeling system that are important to the confectionery industry. The first two elements are informed by the confectionery industry's Always a Treat initiative launched in 2017. First, for transparency to be meaningful, FOP design must include calorie labeling. Always a Treat initiative included a commitment to increase transparency. As a result, 95% of best-selling confectionery products have FOP calorie labels to allow consumers to make informed choices. Given that calories are important from a nutrition standpoint and calorie disclosure is required for products sold in vending machines, it is critical for FDA's FOP system to include a calorie icon for confectionery. Second, alternatives based on package size consideration. Always a Treat initiative also included a commitment to provide smaller portion options to help consumers manage calorie and added sugar intake. This resulted in a significant increase of confectionery products in smaller portion package sizes. This raises space concerns to accommodate the required FOP labeling. Therefore, we urge the agency to consider the application of a FOP on small packs and in these cases offer alternatives to provide this information. Third, color considerations. Studies in Health Canada's consultation on FOP labeling indicated that the consumers encountered challenges understanding FOP labeling when multiple colors are used on the same pack. Thus, monochromatic schemes will likely be useful in fostering consumers' understanding while limiting potential concerns associated with systems that utilize multiple colors, such as traffic light systems. To conclude, NCA supports a voluntary FOP system that provides calorie information and alternatives for small packages, employs monochromatic schemes, and offers factual nutrition information to consumers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next in the queue, we'll have Dr. Anna Grumman, Dr. Nadine Gracia, and then Dr. Frances Fleming-Melici. So, Dr. Anna Grumman with Stanford University, are you here with us and prepared to speak?
I am, thank you.
Excellent, please proceed.
Thank you. I'm an assistant professor of pediatrics and health policy at the Stanford School of Medicine, and I've studied food and nutrition labels for nearly a decade. I want to start by adding my excitement that the FDA is pursuing front-of-pack labeling, given the large body of evidence that consumers benefit from these labels. I also want to make 3 design recommendations based on the research literature, and for each recommendation, I'll provide sample evidence supporting that recommendation. First, as others have emphasized, the evidence indicates that interpretive labels are more beneficial than numeric labels. For example, one study compared high-in interpretive labels to numeric calorie labels and found that the high-in labels increased selection of healthy beverages and snacks by 30 to 59%. The high-in labels also reduce selection of unhealthy beverages and snacks, as you can see on the graph on the right. Second, negative labels have benefits over positive labels. Negative labels refer to labels that are meant to discourage consumption of less healthy nutrients or less healthy foods. One study found that negative labels increased purchase helpfulness by twice as much as positive labels and increased consumer understanding of product helpfulness by 1.5 times as much as positive labels. So both labels can be helpful, but negative labels are more beneficial to consumers than positive labels. Third, labels with icons are more effective than labels without icons and also more equitable. One study found that labels with icons are perceived as more effective than labels with only text. And importantly, this effect was twice as strong for consumers with limited English use, meaning that adding icons benefits priority populations the most. Research also shows that consumers like labels with icons. About 2 in 3 say that high-in front-of-pack labels with icons make them feel more in control of their healthy eating decisions. And moreover, there are many effective icon designs, including some examples on the right here. To summarize, front-of-pack labels should be interpretive, should highlight negative nutrients or characteristics, and should include icons. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And so we're in our queue with Dr. Nadine Gracia, Dr. Frances Fleming-Melici, and then Leah Biondo. So Dr. Nadine Gracia on Trust for America's Health, are you with us and prepared to speak?
I am, thank you.
Please proceed.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today. My name is Nadine Gracia, and I'm the president and CEO of Trust for America's Health, commonly known as TIFA. TIFA is a nonprofit, nonpartisan public health policy, research, and advocacy organization. Our organization is committed to promoting optimal health for every person and community and making prevention and health equity foundational to policymaking at all levels. One of TIFA's longstanding policy priorities is chronic disease and obesity prevention, including through improving nutrition education while advancing health equity. In September of this year, TIFA released the 20th edition of our annual State of Obesity report, which tracks rates of overweight and obesity and provides evidence-based policy recommendations to address this important public health issue. One of these policies encourages FDA to swiftly adopt a mandatory front-of-package labeling scheme. When considering design considerations for a front-of-package label, TIFA urges the Reagan-Udall Foundation and FDA to consider 3 topics. 1, any front-of-package label should be mandatory for all processed foods. Not only is this the most effective strategy for reaching the largest number of consumers, but it would also ensure the biggest public health impact by decreasing overconsumption of nutrients of concern. Second, front-of-package labels should feature an attention-grabbing and easy-to-understand icon or symbol on the package. Research demonstrates that icons lead to enhanced effectiveness for labels, particularly for populations with lower nutrition literacy and limited English proficiency, which would advance health equity. Finally, front-of-package labeling schemes should focus on the 3 major nutrients of concern, including sodium, sugar, and fat. Including the levels of healthy nutrients such as fiber on the same label could lead to confusion and misinterpretation. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Gracia. So in our queue, we have Dr. Frances Melici, Leah Biondo, and Sarah Ludmer. So Sarah, you're the new addition to the queue. Turning now to Dr. Frances Fleming-Melici from the University of Connecticut Rudd Center for Food Policy and Health. Dr. Fleming-Melici, are you present and prepared to speak?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. And thank you for hosting this event. I am representing the Rudd Center for Food Policy and Health, where I have been a researcher looking at food marketing to children and parents of young children, including labeling, for over 10 years. We support front-of-package nutrition labeling and believe it can effectively communicate information about a food's nutrient content if it contains nutrients of concern, is standardized in color and location, is mandatory, and contains a graphic component. However, FDA strategies to reduce added sugar consumption, coupled with mandatory front-of-package disclosures on products high in added sugar, will likely result in reformulation, and this has been raised by others in this group today, and an increase of non-nutritive sweeteners in foods and beverages. Of particular concern is how this impacts children. Despite experts' recommendations against children's consumption of non-nutritive sweeteners among young children, in the US, over 20% of children ages 2 to 5 consume non-nutritive sweeteners in the foods they eat, and there is a potential for this number to rise. In Chile, where a front-of-package warning label was adopted for added sugars, but not for non-nutritive sweeteners, there has been an increase in the presence and consumption of non-nutritive sweeteners in beverages, yogurts, and other products consumed by children. Increases of these sweeteners are already occurring in the US. So, for example, what you could see on the slide here, in 2022, Capri Sun reduced added sugar in its fruit drink product by adding a non-nutritive sweetener. So now 16 of the 21 products and flavors offered by this brand contain some kind of non-nutritive sweetener. Therefore, we urge the FDA to consider in the near term the importance of adding disclosures about non-nutritive sweeteners to foods and beverages to avoid unintentional negative consequences of policy change. In closing, 2 weeks ago, we published a study showing that front-of-package disclosures of added sugar and non-nutritive sweeteners significantly increase parents' ability to identify these in products. We will be sure to submit that with our comment on November 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are going to close out this section after hearing from Leah Biondo and Sarah Ludmer. And so then I will queue up the next section. We'll talk about the intersection of front-of-pack labeling with other nutrition-related policies, where we will first hear from Crystal Register. But finishing out this section, Leah Biondo from the U.S. Cattlemen's Association. Leah, are you present and ready to present? All right, then moving on from Leah, we will turn to Sarah Ludmer with the W.K. Kellogg Company, and let me cue the first two folks in our next section, Crystal Register with FMI, the Food Industry Association, and Julie Green. So first, let's hear from Sarah Ludmer with the W.K. Kellogg Company. Sarah, are you here and ready to present?
I'm here, thank you. W.K. Kellogg Co. appreciates this opportunity. As the government considers FOP designs, it must consider the unique U.S. regulatory and labeling requirements impact on the underlying nutrient criteria to prevent consumer confusion, particularly for those with lower nutrition literacy. Unlike most other regions that have front of pack, U.S. labeling is not based on a single fixed value like 100 grams, but rather it is established for different food categories and reference amounts, or RACs, reflecting typical consumption by Americans. Serving sizes based on these numbers can differ significantly even within a category. Cereals, for example, have 40 and 60 gram racks. Light cereals are those like grain flakes or toasted oats, while heavy cereals are bran-based or those like shredded wheat biscuits. On the slide, the whole grain rich cereal in the center will receive a high in warning. This cereal is an excellent source of fiber, meets WIC requirements, and yet consumers may be discouraged from purchasing it. When compared to the multigrain flake on the left, it has more fiber and less sugar per gram. But using the same criteria for nutrient thresholds on a per serving basis, this doesn't account for its nutrient density. Adding to this complexity, when that multigrain flake on the left is packed in a single serve container, as you see on the right, the serving size is much higher due to labeling rules, and consumers will see a very different front of pack for the same exact food. Setting the same nutrient thresholds per serving across the cereal category will naturally disadvantage heavier cereals, which often contain higher amounts of whole grain and fiber. While not perfect, Canada solves for this issue by using tiered thresholds for negative nutrients, increasing based on the food's rack or serving size to better reflect the overall nutrition. They even have specific exemptions for foods with health protective benefits. Canada's simple interpretive high-end scheme without per-serving data enables this flexibility without creating consumer confusion and supports consumption of nutrient-dense foods. Cereal contributes significantly to underconsumed nutrients in food groups, and we're hopeful FOP systems will acknowledge food categories that support these patterns and positive health outcomes. Thank you, and we'll provide more in greater detail later.
Thank you. And that closes out our first section on design considerations, and we will turn now to the intersection with other nutrition-related policies, such as other labeling efforts and nutrition assistance programs. As a reminder, we'll start with Crystal Register, then turn to Julie Green, and then Dr. Lisa Sanders. Crystal Register with FMI, the Food Industry Association. Are you present and ready to, are you both here and ready to present?
I'm here, thank you.
Please proceed.
My name is Crystal Register, Senior Director of Health and Wellbeing at FMI, the Food Industry Association. Thank you for the opportunity to provide our industry perspective on FDA's front of package nutrition labeling research. FMI is a co-creator of the Facts Up Front program, a voluntary labeling program that remains an important and widely adopted front of pack labeling tool. Facts Up Front was designed to allow consumers to use key product information at a glance with icons that highlight calories, saturated fats, sodium, added sugars, and nutrients to encourage taking values directly from the nutrition facts label to the front of the package. FMI believes this makes Facts Up Front the best suited front of pack scheme with clear facts to help consumers make informed choices. Many of the front of pack schemes FDA has proposed go beyond factual disclosure with subjective characterization. Reducing a food's entire contribution to the diet to whether it is high, medium, or low, or high in 1 to 3 highlighted nutrients to avoid is overly simplistic and will not help educate consumers on how to improve their overall dietary pattern. It's concerning that many nutrient-rich choices, such as whole grain cereals and breads, will likely be perceived as bad or negative when they're otherwise healthful foods many of us currently consume in alignment with the dietary guidelines. We believe meaningful discussion on consumer guidance must include calories. Previously, FDA has linked calories to obesity and diet-related disease. Calories are prominently bold in the updated nutrition facts label and required on menu labeling and vending, yet none of the front of pack schemes tested has calories included. When considering the potential intersection with other nutrition-related policies, there are noted conflicts between the proposed definition of healthy, nutrient content claim levels, guidance for using dietary guidance statements, and the front of pack schemes tested. As policies intersect, there must be alignment of parameters and values must be considered in unison to prevent consumer confusion. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today.
Thank you. Our queue now includes Julie Green, Dr. Lisa Sanders, and then Molly Van Loo. Julie Green with Guiding Stars License Company, are you present and ready to present?
I am, thank you. Guiding Stars is a nutrition guidance program that is both summative and interpretive. Our positive tiered communication approach identifies foods that meet or exceed the published nutrient density standard we introduced in 2006 and continue to refine with the support of an independent scientific advisory panel. In developing this model, we did consider other approaches. Warning labels tell consumers what not to eat, leaving many supermarket products without clear guidance, as most fall between proposed high-end labels and the healthy definition. Many of these products solve barriers to healthier eating, like taste, convenience, and cost. However, if we only have high-end and healthy, we provide no guidance on these numerous better choices. Our positive standard enables Ahold Delhaize and other users to incentivize and reward better choices for everyone along the value chain. Consumers benefit from nutrition incentive and loyalty programs that encourage buying foods earning Guiding Stars, and research confirms its positive impact, especially among those with low income and low health literacy. Manufacturers with products meeting STAR standards are included in health-focused displays and approved product lists for nutrition incentive programs, which boost sales. Food retailers use our program to aim for higher sales of STAR-earning products, earning them better scores in indices that matter to ESG-focused investors. Years of peer-reviewed research shows us the positive impact of Guiding Stars on consumer shopping behavior. But there's also an NIH-funded study in progress to assess how Guiding Stars can complement FDA's proposed high-end labels and healthy definition. This project is also looking at various versions of Guiding Stars score communications to further understand consumer comprehension and behavior. As FDA moves towards front-of-pack labeling, we ask that you consider the meaningful benefits Guiding Stars has had on consumer choices, including those with lower nutrition knowledge, as well as marketplace impacts, and then consider how FDA's proposed FOP labeling may work in harmony with a positive, summative approach such as Guiding Stars. Thank you for the opportunity to share our perspectives.
Thank you. Our queue is now Dr. Lisa Sanders, Molly Van Loo, and Dr. Kristen Hicks-Ruth. Dr. Lisa Sanders from the Institute of Food Technologists, are you here and ready to present?
Thank you very much. I am representing the Institute of Food Technologists, which is a global organization of approximately 12,000 members committed to advancing the science of food. We applaud the FDA for their efforts to modernize and update food labeling guidance to better align with current nutrition science and federal dietary guidelines, and we appreciate this opportunity to make comments. The FDA has put forward for public comment several potential changes to the food label, including an update to the definition of healthy, a healthy icon, a front of package nutrition label, and dietary guidance statements. While some of these proposed label changes are being tested with consumers, the research is in isolation of the other proposed changes to the label. Multiple changes may lead to greater complexity of the label, and as we heard from our earlier panel, consumers desire more simplicity. Therefore, we encourage the FDA to consider these labeling initiatives as a whole and conduct research that would investigate potential interactions of these components on consumer understanding and behavior. For example, how might a consumer understand and respond to a dietary guidance statement of eat yogurt as part of a nutritious dietary pattern if the yogurt also includes a front of package label stating high in added sugar? Alternatively, could a healthy icon on a food label paired with a front of pack label saying low in saturated fat help consumers better understand the nutrients they need to limit in their diet? These scenarios demonstrate potential opportunities for consumer education as well as potential confusion. Therefore, we believe it is critical to test and understand how these label elements may interact to influence consumer behavior. We thank you for the opportunity to provide these comments.
Thank you, Dr. Sanders. So our queue is now Molly Van Loo, Dr. Kristen Hicks-Ruth, and Jenny Hopkinson. Molly Van Loo from the International Fresh Produce Association. Are you, do we have your audio and your video, and are you ready to present?
Yes, I am here, if you can hear me.
We can, please proceed.
Great, thank you. My name is Molly Van Loo, and I'm with the International Fresh Produce Association. Although fruits and vegetables are core elements of the dietary guidelines, only 1 in 10 adults consume recommended amounts, and CDC data show that nearly half of all children between the ages of 1 and 5 do not eat a single vegetable on a daily basis. Accordingly, we strongly support FDA's nutrition innovation strategy. We urge FDA to consider 4 points in this work. 1, while obvious, it is important to note that unpackaged fresh fruits and vegetables often bear little to no labeling opportunities. Additionally, most Americans are well aware that fruits and vegetables are good for them, but instead consume other foods. Number 2, FDA should require fruit and vegetable claims in name or imaging to disclose the quantity of per serving fruit and vegetable servings in household measures. Many foods, including those marketed to children, contain the names and images of fruits and vegetables on their packaging. These marketing tactics make items appear more healthful than they are, despite containing no or minimal amounts of fruits and vegetables. We encourage the agency to consider how this type of labeling influences consumer purchasing habits. 3, the FDA should ensure all of its labeling initiatives intersect well with other federal feeding programs. As FDA pursues initiatives like a healthy logo, it should ensure efforts do not result in consumer confusion, particularly for those who participate in programs like WIC or school meals. For example, a bottle of juice may be allowed to bear a healthy logo, although the DGA and organizations like the AAP have recommended no juice consumption before 12 months of age and limited consumption thereafter. 4, front of package labeling and packaging. Many fresh fruits and vegetables are sold in both US and Canada using the same packaging. With Canada soon implementing its own FOPL requirements, we simply wish to flag this point as an ongoing consideration of how packaged foods may address dual FOP requirements. There is no better way to improve the dietary quality of Americans than by increasing consumption of fruits and vegetables. We stand ready and willing to help serve as an ally to FDA throughout this labeling process. Thank you.
Thank you. Next in our queue, so just a reminder of the queue, Dr. Kristen Hicks-Ruth, Jenny Hopkinson, and then Dr. Courtney Gain. Dr. Kristen Hicks-Ruth from the National Pork Board, are you with us and ready to present?
Yes, I am here.
Excellent. Please proceed.
Hi, my name is Dr. Kristen Hicks-Ruth, and I'm the Director of Nutrition Research at the National Pork Board. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the recent FDA open call for the draft of dietary guidance statements. We conducted a consumer study with Circana of over 1,000 participants across consumer segmentations, including genders, ethnicities, and generations. We compared these across various proteins, and 6 different claims were tested to determine what consumers thought of these different dietary guidance statements. What I think is really important, if you look on the slide, is that top statement, which is actually the longest statement, was the most motivating and believable across all of these protein statements. And not only that, consumers are willing to pay more if they understand the facts behind the guidance. So consumers thought these messages were both motivating and believable because they mentioned the dietary guidelines and they have facts and statistics. Ultimately, the dietary guidance statements are an opportunity to translate dietary guidelines for Americans, having specific and informative messaging, but also having a positive food label on the package. I think that's important to continue to empower consumers on what foods they can purchase versus always scaring them away from purchases. In addition, it's part of focusing on foods and food groups as part of a wholeful, healthful dietary pattern. Thank you for allowing me to make comments.
Thank you. Our queue is now Jenny Hopkinson, Dr. Courtney Gain, and then new to the queue is Amila Fatima. I apologize. So Jenny Hopkinson with the Sustainable Food Policy Alliance. Jenny, are you prepared to present?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to provide input to assist the Food and Drug Administration as it considers front-of-pack nutrition labeling. My name is Jenny Hopkinson, and I'm presenting on behalf of the Sustainable Food Policy Alliance, which comprises some of the world's best-known food companies, Danone North America, Mars Incorporated, Nestle USA, and Unilever United States. SFPA is committed to developing and advocating for policies that encourage and support healthy eating and drinking behaviors to enable all Americans to live healthy lives. My comments today are focused in particular on the potential intersection with other nutrition-related policies, such as other labeling efforts and nutrition assistance programs. FDA, consumers, food and beverage makers, and other public health professionals and other partners must work together to develop and implement a broad and comprehensive approach to educate consumers, enable informed nutrition choices, and facilitate behavior change. Science-based front-of-pack labeling is one of several tools that can play an important role in this approach. As FDA seeks to advance front-of-pack labeling, we trust that the agency will collaborate with stakeholders to create a system that provides clarity to consumers and manufacturers, positively influences consumer behavior, and avoids unintended consequences or conflicts with existing food labeling regulations. To be most effective, SFPA believes that front-of-pack labeling must work in tandem with other federal nutrition policies aimed at boosting consumer nutrition education and healthy lifestyles, harmonize with existing nutrition labeling regulations, including claims and vending machine labeling regulations, and support consumers in aligning their eating habits with the recommendations in the most recent U.S. dietary guidelines for Americans. In conclusion, SFPA looks forward to the opportunity to work with the FDA and other stakeholders to develop an effective and evidence-based front-of-pack labeling system that will make meaningful strides toward improving public health. Thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you. We will close out this section by hearing from Dr. Courtney Gain and then Amila Fatima. Then we'll turn to the international experience section where we will hear first from Eva Greenthal. So let's turn now to Dr. Courtney Gain with the Sugar Association. Dr. Gain, are you ready to turn on your audio and video and present your remarks?
I am.
Excellent. Please proceed.
All right, thank you. My name is Dr. Courtney Gain, and I'm the president and CEO of the Sugar Association. Today, I'd like to emphasize 3 key points. First, the dietary guidelines for Americans are the foundation for federal nutrition policy. Any labeling regulation must stay consistent with the guidelines' emphasis on dietary patterns. Implementing a front-of-package scheme focused only on 3 nutrients to limit is a significant departure from that dietary patterns focus and not consistent with evidence that improving diet-related diseases involves more than just decreased intake of select nutrients. Research demonstrates that diet shortfalls, such as low whole grains and low fruit and vegetable consumption, are greater dietary risk factors than intake of sugar-sweetened beverages. Second, if anything is on front of pack, calories need to be there. The importance of calories cannot be minimized. 2 decades of data tells us that a focus on added sugars reduction without calorie reduction is meaningless from the perspective of improving health. Since its peak in 1999, added sugars intake decreased by 30%, while obesity in children has increased by 44% and adults by 37%. Most consumers believe reduced sugar means reduced calories, but this is often not the case, as manufacturers must substitute other caloric ingredients to replace the palatability and functions of sugar. See my slide, calories must be on the front of pack. Third, a spotlight on reduced added sugars without transparency around the use of low and no calorie sweeteners is misleading. We know that a front of pack scheme will spur product reformulation. The question is, reformulation with what? The current one-dimensional focus on sugar reduction has led to a surge in the use of sweeteners, even in children's products, and without meaningful calorie reduction or improved health outcomes. Consumers may wish to reduce added sugars intake, but not by increased consumption of artificial sweeteners. To avoid misleading consumers, FDA must ensure transparency of sweeteners on front of pack whenever added sugars are highlighted. In summary, FDA must proceed with caution with front of pack plans and ensure that any scheme will improve diet quality, will have minimal unintended consequences, and consumers are not misled. Thank you.
Thank you. Our cue is now Amila Fatima. Then we'll turn to the international experience and hear from Eva Greenfall and then Mylena Gualdron. So Amila Fatima from Unos Dos Dios, are you here and ready to present remarks?
Yes, thank you.
Please proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Amila Fatima, and I'm a health policy analyst for Unidos US. Unidos US is the nation's largest Hispanic civil rights and advocacy organization. Through our unique combination of expert research, advocacy programs, and a network of nearly 300 community-based organizations, we challenge the barriers that affect Latinos at the national and local levels. We appreciate the Reagan-Udall Foundation for the FDA for convening this important meeting and for inviting us to share the Latino perspective on front-of-pack nutrition labeling. Obesity, heart disease, and diabetes are some of the most serious and preventable health conditions impacting the Latino community. A contributing factor to these high rates of diet-related diseases is nutrition knowledge and health literacy, which can create significant barriers to navigating detailed nutrition information on the back of food packages and labels for Latinos. Front-of-pack nutrition labeling is a key tool in reducing health disparities by empowering Latinos to make healthy choices. Federal nutrition programs are critical supports for Latinos who experience food insecurity. Latinos represent 42% of participants in WIC and 16% of SNAP participants. Integrating front-of-pack labeling education into SNAP Ed classes, nutrition counseling at WIC clinics, and at food banks has the potential to empower families to leverage front-of-pack labeling when they're shopping for their groceries. Making front-of-pack labeling mandatory and available nationwide in stores would further aid program participants in making fast, informed, healthy choices for themselves and their children. Front-of-pack labeling can also drive industry to reformulate foods, including Latino cultural staples, in order to score better on front-of-pack systems. This effect would improve the nutritional profile of many foods that are core parts of a traditional diet and improve the food environment for low-income communities of color. By empowering nutrition literacy and informed choices, effective front-of-pack labeling implementation can significantly improve the diets and health outcomes of our Latino communities, advancing health equity for our communities of color. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fatima. So now let's turn to our third section, which is the international experience with different labeling schemas. So we'll turn first to Eva Greenfall, then our queue includes Mylena Gualdron and Marina Ribeiro. Eva Greenfall with the Center for Science in the Public Interest. Ms. Greenfall, are you here on audio and video and prepared to present?
Yes, hello.
Excellent, please proceed.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eva Greenthal, and I'm with the Center for Science in the Public Interest, or CSPI. In August 2022, CSPI filed a citizen petition calling on FDA to adopt a front-of-package labeling system that is mandatory, interpretive with respect to levels of added sugars, sodium, and saturated fat, and includes calories. We are thrilled at the recent progress FDA has made towards designing and studying front-of-package icons. I want to highlight two important considerations for FDA as it moves forward. First, it is critically important that FDA's front-of-package labeling policy be mandatory, not voluntary. The US is several years behind other nations, so we can learn from their experiences, and the data clearly show that mandatory policies are preferable. A 2023 research report from the George Institute for Global Health found that in Australia, 9 years after the government endorsed the voluntary front of package Health Star rating system, Health Star icons appeared on only 36% of products that could be expected to bear the labels. The report found that large multinational companies like Coca-Cola, Mars, Nestle, Unilever, and Mondelez are failing to consistently apply the labels. And healthier product categories like nuts and salads were more likely to bear icons than less healthy categories like condiments and confectionery, showing that when labeling is voluntary, companies will use it for marketing purposes rather than public health promotion. Mandatory labeling will optimize impact and ensure consistency across the food supply. Second, it is important that FDA require front-of-package calorie disclosures alongside FDA's mandatory front-of-package nutrition label. This is one of the few areas where leading food industry stakeholders and consumer nutrition advocates are aligned. While FDA surveys show calories are the most viewed component of the nutrition facts label, IFIC's 2022 Food and Health Survey found that only 29% of consumers looked at calories on the nutrition facts label while grocery shopping. Requiring calorie icons like those already used on some products as part of facts up front will streamline front-of-pack rules with the
Thank you, Ms. Greenthal. We appreciate your participation today. I'll turn now in our queue, Mayina Gualdron, Mariana Ribeiro, and Alejandra Contreras. So, Mayina Gualdron from FIAN Colombia.
I'm here.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. I'm Milena Gualdron. FIAN Colombia, it's an organization that defends the right to food. And together with other civil society organizations, we help achieve the FOPL. We have promoted these steps in the Congress of the Republic since 2017, and it was not until the third attempt that it became law 2120 recognized that they achieve the objective of having healthy food environments that prevent non-communicable disease. It is necessary to have a FOPL system, which is established by the Ministry of Health according to the criterion of the level of processing, and that is based on the greatest scientific evidence free of conflict of interest. These criteria were key or issued to defend the regulation of the law that was given through Resolution 2492, in which the ministry defined that the greatest evidence indicate an octagonal shape with black background that has a warning effect, and white letters with the word excess sodium, sugars, saturated fats, trans fats, and the presence of sweeteners. The content limits of these critical nutrients correspond to the PAHO nutrient profile, the only one based on the level of processing and supported by the NOVA food classification. And what were the keys to our advocacy and mobilization strategy? It's important to understand that all together working closely, civil society and academia free of conflict of interest, they make a good team with the objective of positioning the great difference between a food and an ultra-processed product that damage health, as well as the concept of ultra-processing that goes beyond a critical nutrient. Open spaces for participation and use communication strategies aimed at policy makers and citizens to make visible in the public debate the need of FOPL as a human right issue, which connects the right to clear and easy to understand information with the right to food. Thank you.
Thank you. And now let's turn to our queue is Mariana Ribeiro, Alejandra Contreras, and Gaston Ares. So, Mariana Ribeiro from the IDEC, the Brazilian Institute for Consumer Defense. Are you present with your video and audio prepared?
Yes.
Please proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Mariana. I am a nutritionist and a research analyst at the Brazilian Institute for Consumer Defense. In the case of Brazil, the update for the nutrition food labeling regulation, which include a front-of-package labeling, started in 2014 by our National Health Surveillance Agency, Anvisa, who was responsible for the entire process. In this timeline, I would like to highlight the proposal presented by IDEC in 2017, which defending warning labels with the triangle based on the Chilean experience and available scientific evidence at the time. and then the two magnifying glass models created by Anvisa throughout the process. Also, it is important to mention that we have evidence which indicates corporate political activities of the food and beverage industry interference in the decision of the model that Anvisa approved. Our new regulation was approved in 2020, and although we consider it a model with some limitations, it represents a great improvement for the Brazilian consumers. IDEC advocates for some improvements to the regulation, and I would like to mention three key aspects. First is to include a warning for non-sugar sweeteners as the model of Argentina and Mexico that is important when we think about reformulation of the products in World Health Organization guideline. The second is make our nutrient profile model more restrictive, for example, using PAHO standards, so more unhealthy products will be able to include the front of package nutrition labeling. And the third is to align the resolution with the Brazilian dietary guidelines, considering the level of food processing to list which category of products needs to include the front of package nutrition labeling. That's it, and I would like to thank you all for the opportunity to share our experience from Brazil.
Thank you, Ms. Ribeiro. Our queue now includes Alejandro Contreras, Gaston Aras, and Dr. Barry Popkin. So Alejandro Contreras from the National Institute of Public Health of Mexico, are you present and prepared to present? Yes, thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. Hi for the space. My name is Alejandro Contreras. I'm researcher at the National Institute of Public Health in Mexico. Our Nutrition Research Center developed around 40 documents that describe the result of multiple studies evaluating different labeling systems and nutrient profiles. Warning labels and the Pan American Health Organization model obtained the best results and ideal for the epidemics of obesity and diabetes in Mexico. The participation of the food industry in the regulatory process was a barrier to defending the health and the rights of the population and children. For example, they denied the ineffectiveness of the daily food guidelines, argue against the nutritional profile, and oppose the warnings about artificial sweeteners. The industry arguments were later analyzed and published by Regina Duran, and also in a book led by the Justicia. The covers are in the photos of this slide. Fortunately, with a powerful strategy that combined efforts for academia, civil society organizations, and regional expert committees, warning labels were approved and implemented in 2020 with some innovations such as legends directed at children and numeric seals for small products. The food industry has filed around 150 legal protections to remove or weaken the policy. 6 of the litigations are still ongoing. One of them is from Nestlé and another is from Santa Clara, a dairy brand of Coca-Cola. The latest results indicate that the policy is highly approved, understood, and used in our country. Around 40% of adults and youth report reducing unhealthy food purchases due to the presence of black octagons. We continue evaluating this policy and collaborating with other countries seeking to implement similar results. It is important that regulation for ultra-processed unhealthy foods continue to be free of conflict of interest. I leave information on how you can find us on our social networks. Thank you.
Thank you. We are at the final stages of our queue with our final 3 speakers will be Gaston Aras, Dr. Barry Popkin, and Dr. Mary Labbé. Gaston from the Universidad de la República, are you present and ready to present?
Yes. My name is Gaston Ares. I'm an associate professor at the Universidad de la República. Thank you for the opportunity to share the experience of Uruguay with mandatory front-pack nutrition labeling, which can provide relevant input for the regulatory process of the FDA. The research we conducted in Uruguay provided several similar results than the studies showed before. So Uruguay was the 3rd Latin American country to implement this policy based on warning labels, which correspond to black octagons with the text excess, followed by the corresponding nutrient and the acronym of the Ministry of Public Health. During the design of the policy, the country conducted an extensive amount of peer-reviewed research to design these octagons, and the results stress the importance of interpretive elements to increase understanding and show that highlighting products high in nutrients associated with non-communicable diseases was the most effective approach to encourage healthier food choices, particularly when compared to the GDA or the traffic light system. The research also stressed the importance of the inclusion of icons and contrasting colors such as black and white to maximize impact. After the implementation of the policy in 2020, we have seen an improvement in consumer ability to understand the nutritional information provided on food labels, and we have seen that approximately 6 out of 10 consumers report using this information when making their food purchases, and this number has remained stable since the implementation. The labels have discouraged purchase of products high in nutrients associated with NCDs, and we have not seen any negative effects on the food industry so far. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Of our final two speakers, we have Dr. Barry Popkin and Dr. Mary LeBay. Dr. Popkin from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, are you ready on audio and video and here to present?
Yes.
Excellent. Please proceed.
Our group has been working on warning labels in front of the package labeling for over 15 years. First, I was involved with Healthy Choices, and now with warning labels since we helped design the Chilean law long ago and forward. And we've been working with over 12 countries across the globe with random control trials. And I want to speak here briefly first about Chile in a number of ways. Chile, by the way, is recognized by the World Bank as a high-income country, just like the US. So it's quite comparable in many ways. And you can see here from our evaluation after 3 years, it's not published yet, it's online, but not published, these results showing the impacts. In Chile, one of the things we do is we use energy density along with the cutoffs in the other three, calories, sodium, and saturated fats. We use added sugar, though, because we have it in the front of the package labeling and the nutrition facts panel in the US. So we strongly recommend you use that, not total sugar. Lastly, in coming to reformulation in Chile, as has been mentioned by several speakers, we had significant reductions of sugar, shifts to non-nutritive sweeteners, and sodium shifts to a lot of it going to potassium salt, which is a win-win. So some reformulations are very healthy and helpful, and others are not. What's important on Chile that we learned in our studies and in our focus groups was people would select, if the warning label was on all the nutrients, and people would shift from 4 to 3 to 0 systematically. I think I'm done.
Thank you, Dr. Popkin. That is the end of your time. Yes, thank you so much for joining us. And our last public commenter is Dr. Mary LeBay from the University of Toronto. Dr. LeBay, are you here and ready to present?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Please proceed.
I'm a professor in the Department of Nutritional Sciences at the University of Toronto from Canada. Front-of-pack labeling is a powerful tool to improve diet quality and dietary intakes and ultimately health outcomes through two main mechanisms. First, it changes consumer purchasing and dietary behaviors. Front-of-pack labeling was more easily noticed than the back-of-pack nutrition facts table in Canada, and was especially helpful for consumers with low or marginal health literacy. Canadian consumers would also purchase fewer foods with high-in labels. Second, front-of-pack labeling improves the nutritional quality of foods. As we saw in Chile, and Dr. Popkin just mentioned, manufacturers also reformulated their products to lower levels of nutrients highlighted on the front-of-pack labels. In modeling studies, these changes would avert 2,000 to 9,000 diet-related deaths a year in Canada. Evidence shows that mandatory labels work the best. Voluntary systems have slow and skewed uptake. In Australia and New Zealand, as you see in the bottom left corner, health star ratings were more often on less healthy foods on more healthy food, more often on more healthy foods than in the less healthy foods. And finally, the regulations must be clear. Canada focused on the nutrients of concern with excessive intakes. The design must be interpretive, easily noticeable, and prominently located, and the regulations must be consistent with other policies. For example, Canada's dietary guidelines recommends that processed or prepared foods that contribute excess sodium, free sugars, or saturated fat should not be consumed regularly. Canada's front-of-pack label system will help Canadians identify such foods. And finally, the footnote on our nutrition facts table aligns with the 15% dietary threshold that is used on the front-of-pack label.
Thank you, Dr. LeBay. That concludes our meeting today, and I'm most thank all of you who presented public comment. We appreciate that you joined us and could share your insights. We also thank our panelists and our speakers who joined us, and for each of you who attended the meeting. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.